I love Leon, and I want to marry him someday.
Let's go!
What is Resident Evil 4? That is a loaded question.
Resident Evil 4 is the fourth installment in a long, ongoing horror survival franchise from Capcom.
Resident Evil.
Probably the turning point of the series, love it or hate it.
It revolutionized what we knew of survival horror at the time.
By completely redoing the controls, the mechanics, and the feel of survival horror games.
It's the GOAT.
It's as close as you can get to a perfect video game.
And it means so much to so many people. There's a reason why they keep re-releasing it over and over and over and over again.
Anyway, you know what this is all about.
I can remember exactly what my first memory of Resident Evil 4 was, because it was the trailer which featured Leon on an airship and in a haunted house and being pursued by the ghost Hook Man.
It was a completely different game. It was actually a horror game. It had supernatural elements, there were fixed camera angles, but there was also something very peculiar in the gameplay, and that was the over-the-shoulder camera.
I remember seeing how the camera was behind Leon Kennedy, over his shoulder in this very cinematic 16:9 bars on top look that I remember being so blown away.
This looks so cool.
I remember touching it, being like, how do I get this?
I just remembered something. I bought a GameCube for Resident Evil 4.
I essentially, how do I phrase this? I didn't go to school that day. I ran away. I essentially went to GameStop, got the game, called my homies. We all called out of school together. We told our parents we were sick, went to my friend Dan's house, and we said, no one can know what's going on here. This is our domain. And we played the game for 3 days straight.
I distinctly remember going to GameStop to buy it with my brother, who's older than me, who didn't know I was working under the table as a busboy, and bought this game in full with cash, and him being like, where did you get that money? And feeling extremely uncomfortable about explaining to him for some reason that I had a side gig as a 14-year-old kid. But that is what paid for a game that essentially kind of changed my perception of games.
Resident Evil 4.
I think my first memory of Resident Evil 4 was going through the village, and you do enter a shack, and if you quickly turn to the left, you see one of the villagers, a lady that is pinned up to the wall by a pitchfork. And I just remember seeing that and being like, wow, that's Resident Evil.
The fact that the AI is shielding their eyes from your laser pointer. So you're pointing in their face and they're like, stop, get out of here. I don't want this.
They're more intelligent, they're more aggressive, they're more coherent of what's going on. I think that's what makes them a terrifying enemy.
The villagers can do so many more things than zombies can do. They're throwing things at you, they're grabbing you. Enemies will hit you while you're being grabbed by another guy.
Oh, this is not your mama's Resident Evil.
But it was when their head burst, and all of a sudden there's this weird alien parasite thing coming out of their head that you could shoot and it wouldn't go down.
The enemies were absolutely terrifying, both visually, but then from a gameplay perspective, because it's I don't know what to do anymore. My normal video game tactics of shooting a guy in the head do not work anymore.
When people used to call it a zombie game, they're like, well, actually, they're not zombies. They're parasite infected things with mind control.
They're not zombies. Las Plagas. I have to say that. Las Plagas, not zombies.
If you remember right before that, there's a cutscene where Leon is kind of having this hallucinogenic, oh, I'm mutating, kind of thing. And then you see that right afterwards. It was the stakes have gone from maybe 50 to 150. That can happen to Leon. I have to protect him with my life, with my gamer skills.
This game, not only did it kind of reinvent the survival horror genre for Resident Evil, but it pushed Resident Evil in the direction of action horror.
At that time, it was kind of we were getting a lot of fixed camera angle games.
Even Code Veronica, which was the first fully 3D Resident Evil game as far as the classics go, was still slow. And then Resident Evil 4 comes along, and it is just non-stop action.
But it wasn't in a way where it ruined what we knew from the Resident Evil franchise. It's that it made you feel like you were more intimately a part of it.
You shoot the guy and he staggers, and then you roundhouse kick him, and then he like flies into all of his friends. That creates your opening now, you know, instead of it just being like, oh, my opening is like awkwardly like moving backwards and then like turning left and then running past like a group of enemies.
It was a breath of fresh air, but it was also so jarring to the Resident Evil fandom. Some people loved it and some people did not.
I wasn't a big fan at first when I first played it. This has kind of gone too far away from what I enjoyed.
The first time I actually got hands-on with Resident Evil 4 and like saw it as something that was totally different from what the previous Resident Evils had been, I was honestly blown away. It wasn't one of those things like they changed it. It was just, I was so enthralled with it. I had never played a game that had done it.
Even though you felt like you had more control of your character and that you could get a headshot on somebody without pointing your gun like straight up at the ceiling for no reason, the fact that they managed to still keep a lot of tension and horror was pretty remarkable.
It made you feel like you were seeing from the perspective of the character in real time.
About 3 years ago, I thought I would give it another try. Everybody loves the game, so I wanted to try it again with an open mind, and I absolutely fell in love with it.
Oh, I could just vibe out with this game, you know, just like turn it on, blast some guys stylishly, and like, you know, just do really cool stuff.
You're a dude with sweet hair, a sweet jacket, and you have to go get the president's daughter, period.
Yeah, I am going to fight everything. Yeah, I'm not going to run away. I'm tired of running. I've been running for 4 or 5 games. I'm standing my ground. I'm going to take out the Las Plagas. I'm going to stop Lord Sadler. It's going to be a great time.
The first thing I think of when I think of Resident Evil 4 is probably the thing that everyone thinks of, which is the village.
At first I was like, oh, kind of excited, like let me explore a village. And then everyone starts swarming at you. And I panicked.
You don't know where to go, and they're coming from every angle. You don't feel safe.
I remember panicking, and I remember going into the first house I saw, and then the ability to like, oh my god, I can push furniture.
To stop them from coming in, and just sweating bullets, being like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Talk about sweaty palms. I literally remember my controller, I'd have to like wipe my hands on my pants, and I'm like just like freaking out because you're literally running for your life.
You're just so underprepared and so not ready for anything that's happening.
Every building you go into, there's 3 windows that they can climb in or doors that they can get through.
I'm terrified, but there's a smile on my face.
Oh no, they're coming after us. What do we do? I don't know. Kill them all, I guess. Defend yourself. And it was always this, yeah, this is so awesome. We're going to probably die kind of vibe. And I always loved that.
And that's when the chainsaw thing revs up.
Chainsaw.
It's like, that's illegal. You can't do that. You can't just throw a chainsaw guy at me within the first 10 minutes.
And I remember being in the room with somebody else and them all being like, oh,
It's just batch. It's totally nutcase.
All of a sudden the window would smash, and dude with the chainsaw and the potato sack would just come in and cut your head off.
As I saw his head just fall off the screen, I sat there and I was just like horrified that actually just happened.
I turned off the console and like left and did other things with my life because I was a little bit younger, obviously, but that was just so overwhelming.
That was a one-hit kill that I never wanted to experience.
It was too scary for me. It's too scary. It's messed up.
Everything that makes RE4 great is condensed into the very beginning. It throws everything at you.
It's not for no reason that that's the thing that everyone thinks of when they think of the game.
It's a genre-defining moment.
But it works so incredibly well because it runs on a timer, and you don't know that, so you're just scrambling.
You're just waiting for that bell to ring, and then it's like, oh, that was intense.
Oh, la campana. Es hora de rezar. Tenemos que irnos.
Then when it's all over, you get the classic, where's everybody going? Bingo?
Okay, the first thing I think of when I think of Resident Evil 4, for whatever reason, when this question was just asked to me just now, the thing that popped into my head was Leon Kennedy saying,
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Do you think it would be the combat and the over-the-shoulder, because that was so incredibly mind-blowing when it came out, but I guess it's bingo night.
It's how they introduced the title. I mean, as soon as he says that, the camera pans out and you get Resident Evil 4. I think that's why it's so memorable.
The dialogue is fantastic. No thanks, bro.
No thanks, bro.
They just keep like rattling off. Like you think like the one-liner that you're at is the best, and then you progress further into the game, and then it's like through the roof again.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
My favorite one always, and I feel like I'm the only one that says this, and I say to this day in my own life, whenever I see a dog, is,
Hey, it's that dog.
and it just sounds so unnatural. It's just like, it's that dog. It's a dog. It's like so weird, but I always say it. I don't know why. I'm a weird person.
Pretty much everything Leon says is just like, incredible.
It keeps the camp switch down the whole way through.
Leon S. Kennedy is like an 80s... it's like an 80s action star jock moron.
Leon specifically is like, to me, he is Resident Evil 4.
That's definitely the only thing I think of when Resident Evil 4 enters my brain. It's like, God, Leon's so cool. What the hell?
The dialogue was basically aimed directly at me as a 14-year-old boy. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's basically just quite embarrassing.
I did some research on this actually, and the Japanese game doesn't have these cheesy lines, but it's such a defining factor of Resident Evil 4.
It's why I have such a hard time imagining it being remade. So much of that game's identity is its dialogue.
It's perfect, honestly.
The dialogue in Resident Evil 4 was very cringe, but that was also very fitting for the series. The series has always had one-liners, cringy dialogue. It's what it's known for. It's part of its charm.
I think that's why I can forgive Ashley in the same way that I can forgive every other cliche and stereotype in that game, because it's very clearly deliberately trying to do everything badly.
You know, I know a lot of people like give Ashley a lot of grief. They throw a lot of shade at her. I don't hate Ashley. She doesn't really even do that much in the game. For the most part, you're just like, she's in a dumpster most of the time. Which is pretty messed up.
Basically, leave her in a dumpster while you clear out a room and be like, all right, let's go. There's another dumpster. Get in a dumpster again. And
that's where she belongs.
If I see a dumpster, she's going in it.
What if Ashley didn't suck? You were just a bad player. The Leon, help! And the constantly getting captured and the constantly dying and just the annoyances. That wouldn't happen if you just protected her and you were better at the game. Granted, I'm terrible at the game and I'm constantly hearing, Leon, help!
Leon, pervert! Leon!
Help! Help me, Leon! Leon!
That's Ashley. That's all she says.
Counter to what Leon's goals are, it's almost a relief whenever Ashley gets kidnapped again, because you're just like, all right, well, she's not my problem for the immediate future.
Ashley! What's going on?
Your job is to escort her, and it is part of the game, and I honestly don't think I have as big of an issue with her as most people do.
Definitely my biggest unpopular opinion, but I actually love Ashley.
People hate on her. She's really funny. I think that's the entire idea. She is very, very funny.
Hey!
Overall, I didn't mind her. I thought she was a necessary part of the story.
I think without her being an escort, lots of the challenge wouldn't, and the stress probably wouldn't be there as much.
I know that she, gets grabbed and picked up, but the parts where you have to play as Ashley just on her own and she's got to defend herself, I think she does a pretty good job.
One of my favorite moments in RE4 is when you actually do get to play as Ashley.
You're just so vulnerable during those sections where you have to like wander around.
And it becomes a survival horror game again.
Specifically, there's the suits of armor that will like chop down on you, but I think they kind of do some fake outs where like some of them do it, but some of them don't. So I remember the whole time just being like incredibly on edge.
You're just carefully trying to make your way through this environment. And there's just like, it all culminates into this really annoying, but also iconic in its own right, like slide puzzle that like nobody ever knows how to do, It's just like, just fiddle with that for a while.
There aren't a lot of moments in horror games that scare me, but in this one, I specifically remember having to actually pause the game and take a mental break once the regenerators came out.
And And then just like the way they move, like how frantic.
They're like they're twitching and they've got their teeth and their glowing eyes and the sounds that they make.
And you just hear they're like
I always refer to it as it makes pug sounds the way it breathes.
I don't want to listen to those things. I don't want to hear that thing. I don't want it to grab me and like shoot spikes through me. I don't want to fucking deal with it.
I think they also do that really cool thing that games sometimes do where you're like going through a facility and you're picking up notes and they're saying like, oh, this thing we're working on is like really horrible. And you go into the next room and it's like, the horrible thing's escaped. Oh no. And then you go into the next room and there's like a dead body. And it's like, oh, the horrible thing did something really horrible. I can't believe it. And then you're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in this room.
And then you think you killed them because you shot their leg and they're on the floor. And then suddenly they jump and they grab Leon by the neck.
It's terrifying.
But then you get to guys like the Ganados, who you have to like essentially sneak around.
I will never forget the first time playing that with a friend next to me and like the feeling we both had of like, like as this thing was like running your way.
If you don't know what you're doing, that they are incredibly fast. They do so much damage that you're in a tiny room. You need to have good aim. You have to not panic.
Hearing it scream, like when it's like, rah, 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 rah.
If he grabs you, like that's it. Like it's like one of the scariest death scenes ever. Like with his claws through your head and then through your torso. Terrifying.
When you're surrounded in the cabin.
Look.
You're still not quite strong enough. There's way more enemies than you're used to seeing. They basically all of them have the parasite heads, so they're like extra strong. You escape upstairs, and then they start coming in through the windows upstairs while they're coming up the stairs from downstairs. Luis is just like there with his gun, and he's like, pff, pff, pff. Great job, Leon. Pff. Like he shoots like one bullet every minute, and then he's like, oh, help me. Like, help yourself, face.
There's a lot of moments that really take you off guard in that game.
I keep forgetting how much mad there is in there, and nothing is madder than being chased by the giant, like, skyscraper-sized doll. I can't wait for the Resident Evil 4 remake to cover that section specifically. And if they don't cover it, they've bottled it. They have absolutely bottled it.
You three in the cages, that might be one of the scariest boss fights just in video games. This giant nightmare tongue axe blade tentacle thing chasing you through like a series of suspended cages. You just don't want to be there.
I really love the Del Lago boss fight.
He's very unpredictable, like what he's gonna do, and you're like literally tethered to this like building-sized monster, so you're just stuck in this situation.
You don't have your guns, and even if you did, they wouldn't do anything. So Leon has to like use his harpoons.
It's exciting and thrilling and scary, and like it's good fun.
One of the biggest jump scares is right before the boss battle.
When you're about to get on the boat for the first time and you shoot the water, the fish monster just comes out and takes you.
El Gigante, of course, is just... He's definitely my second favorite, and it's interesting because they literally happen one after another.
You're like, dude, what am I gonna do? And then suddenly the dog appears and helps you fight him off, and it's like the coolest thing. Like I just remember being like, what is the dog? Oh my god!
They're these massive set pieces, almost like Shadow of the Colossus to a degree, right? But obviously not as large.
You could jump up on his back like Shadow of the Colossus and stab his parasite.
There was just something so enthralling about taking down this huge ogre-looking character, and then it's like, aim for the open spot, and it's this gross tentacle bug thing, and you're like, oh, I hate this, but I also want to kill it. I want to squish it because it's gross, and I want this ogre to stay down.
I really remember Krauser very fondly. I remember a lot of it being QuickTime event heavy, but at the time it was so cool.
I think the fight between you and Krauser is like one of the coolest things. I remember being young and be like, oh, this is so cool. Like two tough guys fighting with knives, and I'm like pressing buttons to make it look cool. Like, yeah, I'm sweet. It's
kind of worth it to see Leon do a backflip. That makes it worth it. That's fine. But yeah, no, not a fan, but what you gonna do?
Honestly, I never really hated them. And in Resident Evil 4, for the most part, I thought they were, I actually thought they were fine. Like, running away from the boulder, I think, is the first QTE moment, if I remember correctly. And it was kind of just a surprise, like, oh, okay, I'm in it, I got it.
QTEs can very quickly be replaced by just running away from the boulder as it's coming without taking you out of the gameplay style and switching the camera. QTEs, to me, it just feels kind of like a lazy gameplay design, and I was never really a fan of those.
They're just silly fun. If it wasn't for the QTEs in Resident Evil 4, we wouldn't have Chris Redfield punching a boulder in Resident Evil 5. So, you know, you got to make sacrifices sometimes.
Before I played Resident Evil 4, I played Shenmue. And Shenmue is the game that's kind of notorious for defining QTEs.
What we saw, though, is that Resident Evil 4 became so popular that I think everyone at that point may have just been okay with QTEs as a accepted form of progression and gameplay loops.
And I think that was one of the things that I would say was kind of a net negative. Like, we got way too many QuickTime events after this game came out. But at the time, it was cool.
It is one of the most influential games of all time, which is insane considering Resident Evil 1 is also one of the most influential games of all time.
It reshaped how third-person action games were made.
Like, if you're a third-person action game, you're using the over-the-shoulder camera, and that's it all stems from RE4.
It became this template that everyone was using.
Games like Dead Space,
Gears of War, the Batman Arkham series.
God of War has an over-the-shoulder camera. You know, Last of Us is heavily inspired by it.
And it was done simply with a camera placement.
Because it really brings you into action.
You see what made Resident Evil 4 so great. It translated through 5, 6, even 7 in Village. You see the best of elements stem at Resident Evil 4 and even go backwards to the remakes, right?
I mean, even the Resident Evil 2 remake followed it as far as gameplay goes, and I think it's because it really, really worked.
Resident Evil 4 is the game that kind of saved the genre.
It brought life to the series when so many people were saying that it was becoming dated, even though I love the original games.
Survival horror as a whole was kind of being burnt out by that time. Like, there wasn't really a lot of life left in fixed camera angles and tank controls and all these adventure game elements that kind of found its way into it. And Resident Evil 4 took all that, threw out the window, and reinvented not just the genre, but third-person action games.
Without Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil as a series would absolutely, I don't think, exist or not exist in the way it does today.
It's probably one of the early horror games that I really loved and also felt like I could play without getting too scared. So, you know, and I love horror media now, like films and TV and games. And so Resident Evil 4 probably did have like quite a kind of considerable effect on me.
I mean, it's what got me into Resident Evil as a franchise.
Resident Evil 4 is a game that I've played more times than any other game I've ever played, period. On my counter on my original GameCube file was like 27 times I probably had played that game through. And that's not including the times I played it on the Wii and on my PS4 and on my Nintendo Switch and now Oculus.
It taught me a lot as a film student. At the time that Resident Evil 4 came out, I was about to graduate from high school to go into college and to get a degree in film. It taught me a lot about cinematography, what the camera shows you in action moments, what it doesn't show you in those action moments. There's just so much to learn from Resident Evil 4 that it's a game I probably think about at least a couple times a year.
I had cut my hair like Leon. I dyed it blonde. I was wearing like Under Armour shirts to school, pretending it was like his like secret agent shirt. I was all in at that point.
If you're sick of people talking about Resident Evil 4, I understand why, but you probably should play it still. It's that good.
I just love Leon so much. I guess that's like how I would end it. Just, I love Leon and I want to marry him someday.
And then you had the Bella sisters. We actually made a whole theory that they're all a family of professional lumberjacks before all of this happened, and they were participating in carving championships and getting a bunch of trophies. And then Leon came in and started killing all the villagers and all their family members. So they were just doing their part for this intruder.